Ruthless Compassion is a podcast about how you can turn your emotional shit into fertilizer for success and see your darkest moments as opportunities to transform into a powerful kindness warrior. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a review wherever you listen. Welcome, Carlita Ector, to the Ruthless Compassion podcast again.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you again, and I'm very excited to talk to you about your new project. But before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself again to the listeners? And because the last time you were on, you went by your stage name. So why don't you give them another little update about who you are and what you do?
I am Carlita Ector. I am the executive director of Darkness Rising Project nonprofit. And in addition to that, I also do musical theater.
So you have a couple of hats that you wear.
A few, yeah.
All right. So the last time we were talking, it was a while ago. Was it pre-COVID or was it during COVID?
I want to say it was right toward the beginning of COVID.
Yeah, it's like that whole period of time, it's like it's all a blur, right?
Right. It really is.
All right. Well, so the last time we were talking, you were talking a lot about the Darkness Rising project, but why don't you remind the listeners what that is? Because that's an important thing that you're doing.
Darkness Rising is a 501c3 arts and mental health nonprofit, and we provide free mental health resources to marginalized communities. And we also have an arts leg, an arts component to our programming where we produce shows with our Broadway performers. And during those shows, our performers speak pretty candidly about their own mental health journeys in a way that really encourages people to seek help. And we also provide our free mental health resources during those shows.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really great. And now you have a new project. How long have you been working on this new rebuild program?
We have been working on this for the past 2 years, and we are now in a situation where we want to be able to continue providing the program. The Rebuild program is a free service that is offered to formerly incarcerated people of color, where we provide free therapy, up to 10 sessions for anyone who has been formerly incarcerated and is a person of color. We do have a voucher application process where they can apply for these vouchers. And then in addition to that, we have therapist connectors who not only provide the payment for these services, but they also set up the consultation, they set up the ongoing sessions, they do consistent check-ins with our therapy seekers to make sure that they feel safe and welcome during their therapy sessions, and they create relationships with our therapy seekers.
Wow, so you have a whole program set up. What made you think about doing this? This is a little bit different than what you've been doing with your Darkness Rising project.
Yes. So Mariam Kaba approached us, and Mariam is an amazing organizer, abolitionist, and writer, all over amazing, incredible human being who approached us, as well as Yolo, who's the executive director of Beam, as well as the organization called Depressed While Black, and asked us if we knew of or already provided these services. And at the time, Darkness Rising was already providing a free service where we would find therapists for Black community members. But this service wasn't a service that was dedicated solely to the formerly incarcerated community. And in addition to that, with that service, we weren't providing free therapy because we didn't have the resources to do that. So when Mariam approached us and asked us if we were interested in that, and she had done a lot of research about whether or not a program like this already existed, which it does not, we were really excited to start something like this. And she is our co-founder as well as our advisor for the Rebuild program.
So what is it about, therapy for people who have come out of incarceration? Why is that important for them to, start that soon after they've been released?
Therapy is so important for people who have been incarcerated previously, are coming out of incarceration, are transitioning back. It's so important for so many reasons, and there's so much trauma that can be caused by being incarcerated. There's so much trauma that's caused by witnessing a family member who's been incarcerated. There's so much trauma that's caused by police brutality, and then witnessing so much of that state violence within the prison system. So when people come out of incarceration, they may be coming from being in solitary for 18 months, like some of our therapy seekers, or they may be coming from not being around their own children, and missing so much in their own families. And then when they return from incarceration, there's this separation period where they are getting to know their family members and their children all over again after having missed so much of their lives. And so, what Rebuild provides is a really helpful transition period where our therapist connectors also have been formerly incarcerated. So they know the deal.
Hmm.
They understand the process. They know how hard it can be to transition back. They know the trauma that's incurred, and just having someone there with you that understands that process and that also has been on their own therapy journey. It can help someone understand, oh, therapy is so vital. Therapy also reduces the recidivism rate consistently and
Mm.
consistently. And so we have found that we have less than a 1% recidivism rate with our program for all of our therapy seekers. We're so proud of our therapy seekers who have consistently been in therapy, have continued the program, and have reached all 10 therapy sessions and have not returned back to prison.
That's amazing. I was thinking, now this is kind of a funny analogy, but if I go away for vacation for a week or 2 and I come home, I feel so completely out of the loop. I haven't been listening to the news. I haven't been in touch with people back home. I come back and I have to transition back to home after a week or 2. I
Yeah.
cannot imagine how disconnected from day-to-day reality, you might feel after you've been away for years. I think I would feel so alienated, right? So separate, so disconnected from everyone and everything. I can't imagine how difficult it must be for someone, aside from, the shame, the difficulties with just getting a job, getting housing, all the really fundamental things, but just that emotional disconnect, right? Of like, this is the world and it's been going on without me all these years.
Absolutely. We have so many therapy seekers who have been othered because, by our society standards, formerly incarcerated people are often othered and they do feel that sense of shame. And upon the return back, are reacclimating with society, are trying to find consistent employment, and not only consistent employment, but employment that can actually pay the bills. They're trying to provide for their children. A lot of them have been away for 10, 20 years. So there's new technology that they're now learning. And so much of that technology is required for employment. And then if you don't have consistent, or if you do have underemployment, if you're underemployed, then that becomes even harder to get housing. We have one of our therapist connectors who was not able to receive housing on her own until she was more than 40 years old. She had to live with another person. And she found it so difficult to find good housing by herself. And we've now seen her step out, and now she lives on her own. She has a beautiful place, and we're so proud to see things like that. But that becomes possible when people have
Mhm.
the tangible resources that they need for the return back.
That's important. That's really important. And, statistically, right, when we think of the prison system in the United States, what is the proportion of people of color, especially Black people, compared to white people in the prison system in the US?
I don't have the exact numbers, but that is something that we post on we do a Fact Tuesday on Tuesdays on our Instagram. And the numbers for people of color, and specifically Black people, are considerably higher than their white counterparts. And as we were looking into this, and I asked, well, why is that? A lot of that, of course, has to do with racism, discrimination, all of those things. And our Black community members often receive harsher sentences and more often. And so that is the reason why, when you look into the prison system, Black people are often in prison for a longer period of time and receive harsher sentences.
For sure, you'll have a white guy who's got a bag of cocaine in his pocket and the police catch him, and a Black guy who has a bag of cocaine in his pocket and the police catch him, and they'll have a very different experience with the legal system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so much of that, of course, comes from, discrimination, white supremacy, all of those things. And the only way for us to fight it is for us to call it out, A, and then create these resources for people who have been impacted by this. And then also work on our policies so that our policies that are impacting marginalized communities can have a more positive impact.
That's wonderful. So this is an amazing thing. How many people have used your services?
That's a great question. We are so proud that more than 600 sessions have been funded for formerly incarcerated people of color. And then, in addition to that, we have served more than 200 people, formerly incarcerated people of color.
That's great.
And then through our Find Me a Therapist program, that program offers a free connection to a Black therapist for our Black community members. We've served more than 800 people through that program. And we're so proud of all the connections that we've made for people who are seeking a therapist who looks like them.
It's interesting, you would think that any therapist would do, but I think that it's true, there's a lot of unconscious racism, unconscious bias, unconscious privilege, unconscious whatever that even therapists carry. And even if they don't, I can see that it could be more comfortable for someone, especially someone who's used to experiencing microaggressions and who doesn't feel safe in general, that they'd want to feel as safe as possible. And so that would just be one more layer to help them feel as safe and comfortable as possible so that they could open up and be vulnerable, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I have found in my own therapy journey is that I did initially have a white therapist and it was helpful at the time. But I also realized during that journey that I really wanted someone who understood my culture. I really wanted someone that I didn't feel like I would need to be explaining the microaggressions I was having about my hair at work, the microaggressions that I receive that I feel on a daily basis. I wanted to be able to not explain that during the session and for my therapist to just kind of get it. And so I now have a Black woman therapist, and we spend less time with me explaining, well, this is why this hurt me, or this is why it was a problem, or this is my family's background with this. And she just kind of like knows, well, in the Black culture, this is just kind of a thing. So she understands why certain things have been
Mhm.
hurtful to me. And it's just, I feel like I'm really getting my time's worth. You know what I mean?
For sure, for sure, for sure. Whatever can make a person feel safe, right?
Absolutely.
I remember hearing about this really interesting program called the Barbership Initiative. I don't know if you heard about that. It's basically an initiative where these researchers discovered that especially Black men, young men and older men, really had difficulty talking about their feelings. I mean, guys in general have difficulty talking about their feelings and being vulnerable and expressing their concerns. But for, a lot of men in the Black community, that's also something you don't do. So they had this thing where they put people into the barber shop, or they trained the barber to talk about feelings with the men and the young men. And they had, resources available in the barber shop. So if the customers wanted to do more, work on themselves, they could, talk to some people outside of the barber shop. But I thought that was such a fantastic initiative because, here's a way to get to the people through something that feels less uncomfortable, and they can open up and be vulnerable to their barber, and it's not like in a bar where you're drinking, so it's, it doesn't really count. But these people are sober and they're talking about their feelings to somebody that they trust and feel safe with. So I thought that was a great initiative. So yeah, anything that helps somebody feel safe, right?
Absolutely. And that is an incredible initiative. And we experience so much through our hair. And so we're so close to the people that we let touch our hair, especially for Black people. I am so specific about who I let touch my hair. So that person has to be somebody that I trust. And then so upon, letting that person that I trust touch my hair, that means that I probably will trust them with some of my secrets too. So that's such a beautiful initiative because it absolutely does make people feel safe, feel welcome, and feel like they will not be judged. You know what I mean? And that allows our men to open themselves up. That allows people to really get a chance to say, "Hey, this is what's going on with me, and I feel safe."
You brought up the word microaggression, and I think it's a word that not everybody understands. So I would love it if you could please share, what your definition of that is, so that the listener who might not really be clear gets more information about it.
Yeah, to me, microaggressions are the small, obscure things that are not really said, but said. They might be said with tone, they might be said with a look, it might be something that's undermining your experience, it might be something that's invalidating your experience, but they're not as clear in terms of, well, that was so obviously racist, right? Like, we know immediately when a white person uses the N word, we're like, racist, yeah, right? But beyond it, racism is not just that. Racism is looking at a marginalized person's experience and devaluing that, and or asking really pointed questions that can be hurtful to that person.
Can you think of any off the top of your head?
Sure, absolutely. So one of them that I've experienced my whole life has been about my hair. So I might walk into work with my hair just freshly done, and someone will say, "Is that your hair?" And then I would say, "Would you ask a white person that? Or are you asking me that because I'm Black?" How often do we ask a white person, is that their hair? Or how often do we make commentary about a white person's hair changing all the time? So if I get my hair done every 2 weeks, why would you ask me if, these braids are mine or if they're fake?
And what difference does it make?
Right.
What difference does it make? You can do whatever you want with your hair. You're free to do whatever you want with your nails. Like,
So ultimately, the statement that they're making is that I cannot have possibly grown my hair to this length. That this couldn't be my hair. And that's something that I've dealt with in the acting world, in the corporate world. And then I've also often dealt with, especially during the summertime, a white person coming up to me and saying, "Oh, I'm as dark as you. I'm going to be as dark as you soon."
oh
And
my
why
God.
and why would you need to say that? You getting a tan, it's not going to make you as dark as me. I'm a dark skinned woman. It's not going to make you darker than me. But let's say that it makes you darker. You're still not going to have my daily experience. No matter how dark you get from your tan, you will not have my lived experience as a Black woman.
Holy moly, I'm sorry. This is, like, upsetting me. I'm having vicarious trauma here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm getting an education, right? This is really good. This is good for me because, you can still teach an old dog new tricks, so I'm learning stuff. Wow, wow. I'm really
It's
sorry. Wow.
it's something that we face daily, and sometimes it feels like it's almost like we're getting used to it. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna get used to that. That's not, I'm gonna call people out, and we get afraid. I know I have been afraid. I'll speak for myself. I've been afraid of mentioning it or calling people out in the past, or letting people say, "Oh, well, I'm a Black woman on the inside." No, you're not. You are not. I am a Black woman on the inside and the outside, and my lived experiences will never be yours. But those are the things that we hear on a daily basis that people just pass off as just okay to say.
Yeah. I think that sometimes, like, I think the thing with your hair, like when somebody said that thing, "Is that your real hair?" I think my sense is that they're negating the validity of your beauty. Like, you couldn't possibly be beautiful because you're a woman of color. You must be faking it. You must be cheating. You must be tricking the system. You couldn't just be naturally beautiful because being Black and beautiful don't go together. That's what I'm hearing.
That is also
Right.
what I hear.
Okay, so we're on the same page there.
Absolutely. And so for much of my youth, I didn't put that together. It subconsciously hit me as,
Yeah.
I am not as pretty. Those are the things that hit me. And then it wasn't until adulthood that I realized, yes, I am. I am just as beautiful. It doesn't matter if this is my hair or not. I am just as beautiful. And I'm beautiful in my own right. I don't even have to be compared to my white counterpart. I am beautiful in my own right. And my skin is beautiful in its own right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the other one you said, it's like when someone comes up, "Look, I'm as dark as you now." That to me shows it's funny, someone inadvertently demonstrating profound ignorance because, as you said, they are talking about a tan, and it's a whole different kettle of fish to have a nice tan because you're wealthy enough to go south for however long in the, winter time. You know, Having a tan is not the same as living as a person of color. So it's just, they don't even realize how much they are demonstrating profound ignorance of the difference between what a tan is culturally, symbolically, and what having dark skin is culturally and symbolically. So I guess they're trying to bond with you, but they're showing how clueless They are. And rather than bonding with you, they're just showing their entitlement and making you feel less than because you know that it's not the same as having a tan to be a person of
Absolutely.
color. Yeah.
And what they're asking me to do is laugh with them to excuse it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to excuse it. I'm going to let you know that's not appropriate.
It's not nice. And now let's pause for a quick word about my other podcast. Since I was a kid, I've loved watching movies. As a psychiatrist, I'm blown away by how film touches us at our core, deepens our self-knowledge, and can improve the human condition. I wanted to let listeners know that I've started a new podcast called Real Mental with Dr. Marcia Sirota. I'm going to be talking with film and TV experts to help people figure out their lives by getting to the truth about mental health on the big and small screen. Some recent films covered are Turning Red, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and Asteroid City. Please subscribe to Real Mental on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. The final thing is when someone says, "Oh yeah, I'm a Black woman inside." Okay. In the nicest interpretation, what I'm hearing is, like, I think that there's something wonderful about Black culture and I want to partake of it and I want to be empathetic and I want to show you that I feel that I have attributes that are also considered part of your culture. But again, it shows some entitlement and some ignorance because, like you said, the person saying it will never experience the kinds of macro aggressions and microaggressions that you experience on, like you say, a daily basis. So, it's easy to be a Black woman on the inside because you're never going to get all the crap of a Black woman on the outside.
Right. The thing is, people love Black culture, but they don't love Black people.
Oh, can you just say that again, please? Just to repeat it. It bears repeating.
People love Black culture, but they don't love Black people.
That's like mind-boggling, right? How is that? How can that be? I totally agree with you, but what a weird disconnect, right? They appropriate everything from
Mhm.
Black culture.
They want here's the thing, people want what we have to offer, right? They brought us here, we built up the land, we brought our food, we bought our music, we bought our dances, we bought, all of these
Fashion,
things, right?
fashion, art,
All of these,
music, everything. Yeah.
and so much of this was stolen from us.
Yeah.
And it continues to be stolen from us
Oh,
over
yeah.
time with no attrition for what has happened over hundreds and hundreds of years. And then people say, oh well, it's just because I love Black people so much, so that's why I'm appropriating your culture, or that's why I wanted to get my hair done just like yours, or that's why I'm using a black scent. It's just because I love Black people so much. But that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because you're so used to taking from us. And when you take from us, it gets put on display and everyone loves it, But when it's us, when it's our hair, I remember I was 14 years old and I had my hair in braids. And I went to work with my hair in braids for the first time. And my supervisor said, "You can't wear your hair like that." And I was 14. And I was told, he said that it was ghetto for me to have braids in my hair.
Was he a white guy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
He told me I was not allowed to wear braids and I needed to take them out. 14. And so the message that I received was, it's ghetto because I'm a black girl. That's why it's ghetto. But I see white girls, white women with their hair in braids all the time, colorful braids, beads on their braids, all of these things that I am told is ghetto. But when a white person does it, it is socially acceptable.
It's
Or when
cool.
Right. Or when a white person does it, it now becomes the biggest trend. And we're like, that's not a trend. I grew up like that. I grew up with beads in my hair. I grew up adding colors to my braids. That's how I grew up. That's part of my culture. And suddenly, because a white celebrity does it, now it's the brand new trend. No.
Yeah, I remember. I wish I could remember who it was, but it was a Black singer who recorded a song and it didn't do that great. And then a white artist recorded it and made a fortune. The Black person didn't get the royalties and they didn't give attribution, of course, to the Black singer. And they became a superstar, the white one. And the Black person who recorded the song first, who wrote it, nothing, right? So Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's about we're just used to thieving and we want to take all the credit. We want to have all the coolness, all the credit, and just the usual, stealing and plundering and, typical colonizer mentality.
Right, because that that is something that has been so normalized, over the course of hundreds of years. So why would someone feel like, "Oh, I should attribute the person that this actually comes from or the culture this comes from?" And then in addition to that, when a white person goes to work in their braids, no one is going to tell them, "Hey, you're ghetto. You need to take that out of your hair." No one is going to tell them that. Instead, they're going to say, "Oh, that's so cool. I love your braids." They're going to receive praise for that. The impact is certainly not the same.
I think it's the same with clothing, right? Like you
Absolutely.
wear an outfit, it's considered a certain way. A white person wears the same exact outfit, no problem, right?
Even down to, this gets into another conversation, but it even impacts body type. So my body type comes from my mama. I have her hips, I have a curvy body type. And something that I notice is sometimes when I would post on social media and I would be wearing the same thing that my white counterpart is wearing and dancing and doing the same dance that they're doing, but I would get flagged and they would not get flagged. And I always felt like it had to do with body type, and I felt like it had to do with race as well. So that's something that it's ongoing.
It's like I always find it remarkable that, when you're subject to that much crap, that you're not more angry all the time, you know? Because, like, I would be well, maybe I wouldn't. I can't even know how I would feel. Like, I'm saying I would be so mad, but I don't know if I would be mad because maybe I would just be so, like, I don't know, like, despondent or, like, just it is what it is. But wow, man, wow, just
I
wow.
think that that's such a great point. I think so many of us have spent so much of our time angry, hurt, disappointed. So much of my childhood into adulthood has been spent that way. And I now try to use that anger to fuel me into Darkness Rising, to fuel me
Yeah.
into ensuring that we can provide therapy for people who look like me. But that anger, that pain, it doesn't fully ever go away. And that's why I stay in therapy. I have experienced so much racial trauma in my life. And so many of my family members, my friends, listening to their stories is heartbreaking. And then watching the news, again, heartbreaking, hearing story after story of police brutality and especially the impacts that it's had on Black people. That pain, it doesn't go away. And then when you go to work and the people you work with, it's like they have no idea. When I remember when I was working in a primarily white office, and I would go in and it was like people had no idea that over the weekend a Black man was killed at a traffic stop over something so small. And I would report to work and just, "Hey, good morning, how was your weekend?" Not good, and it was like they just had no idea.
Oblivious.
Completely oblivious. That was so hurtful. And that anger, I'm using it to fuel me, but it hasn't fueled me every day. There have been days when I've just felt so down and just, when is this ever going to end?
I was just reading a book by a feminist, and her name is Caitlin Moran. She's from the UK, and it was a book about what's going on with our men these days, right? But I was thinking, like if you're in a group, like as a woman, as a feminist, right? And you're constantly identifying misogyny and you're constantly identifying anti female sentiment and you're constantly recognizing how at risk women are when they're out and about in the world, right? Women in college are constantly being sexually assaulted. Women at folk festivals are constantly being sexually assaulted. Like everywhere we go, we're being underpaid, undervalued, assaulted. But as a woman, as a white woman of privilege, I can be aggravated, frustrated, annoyed, but it doesn't have the impact on me because I do not feel like less than. I feel like the system's a mess. I feel like, people don't get it, that feminists don't want to take over the world. We just want equal everything. We just want to share, right? But women, half of the planet, don't have a history like Black people of being, sold into slavery into, parts of the world, and then the enslavers refusing to relinquish their attitude of dominance and oppression toward a whole cultural group, right? So it's not the same. So if someone says, "Oh yeah, I'm a feminist, so I understand how Black people feel," it's like, no,
Not the same.
it's intersectionality, right? You can be
Absolutely.
a feminist and white, and you can be a feminist and Black, and they're a whole different kettle of fish, right? So,
Mhm.
so I think I'm really getting that, even though sometimes I feel like, ugh, being a woman, it's like I get so frustrated about some nonsense. It's nothing like, you talk about this constant trauma, this racial trauma. I've never experienced anything like that. I never will. Like, I know that I won't, no matter what field I'm in, no matter where I go. I will just never have that life experience. And, I really, really get like the magnitude of difference of your experience and mine, and I'm sad about that. I just keep thinking, like, what could we do to change this insanity, right? Because really the only difference between your ancestors and my ancestors is that mine came from Europe, Eastern Europe, and they came fleeing oppression, but they didn't, come being sold into slavery. And yours, had a different reason for coming here. But that's the only difference between us, just where our ancestors came from. Because there's, people have come from everywhere, but having that particular history that people just don't want to relinquish that attitude, that conceptualization toward you has made a whole cultural group, other, as you say, different. It's bonkers.
Absolutely. It's being othered your entire life is certainly one of the most traumatic experiences that never goes away. I remember I was just taking my dog for a walk yesterday, in fact, and just a normal walk. And while I was walking, I just had a traumatic memory of a time that I was walking to a dance class in a new neighborhood, and I didn't know the neighborhood at all. So I ended up in someone's backyard accidentally as I was walking through. And a white man came out and very aggressively was like, "What are you doing? Where are you going? You're in my yard. You better get out of here right now." Was yelling at me. And I was so apologetic. I was like, "I'm so sorry. I don't know where I am. I'm not from here. I'm just trying to get to dance class. I don't even know where I am." And I was terrified. This was right after Trayvon Martin was killed. And I have never been, I was crying. And I've never been in more fear of my life than I was at that
Yeah.
moment, because he was like, "You better get out of here right now." And then he starts walking back toward his house, and he's like, "If you're out here when I'm back." And I was terrified. But that memory just popped up when I was just taking a walk with my dog. And this happened to me. I mean, this was years ago,
But you got re-triggered just by walking.
just by walking, because I remembered I'm still in a white neighborhood.
Yeah.
I'm still in a white neighborhood, and you just never know.
And here you are, you're trained as an actor, you're running, huge organizations, like you're a person of substance, and you have self-esteem, and you have therapy, and you have like so much going for you, and yet, you can go for a walk with your dog and have a trauma trigger.
Absolutely. And those things, it just doesn't go away. You never know when you will accidentally ends up at the wrong person's house or in the wrong neighborhood. Even just driving through certain neighborhoods, I'm terrified. I'm worried that I might get stopped by the police just for being Black or just for not living here. And as an actor, I travel a lot. So I end up in unfamiliar places a lot, and it gets really scary.
I can just imagine. Yeah. Like I keep thinking about that young man who was in the park and some woman started like going off on him, right? She was a crazy person. And what was she saying? What was she accusing him of? Like
Um,
accosting her?
Yes, I think you might be referring to
Bird watcher.
the bird watcher. Yeah, right. And there was another woman, a similar situation, but it was about a dog.
Yeah.
Or actually, no, the bird watcher, she had her own dog.
Yeah.
Now, yes. And so you could just be minding your business, and someone will just start accosting you just because of the color of your skin, because they feel like you can't be trusted because of the color of your skin. And that pain, it doesn't go away. And so we're taught, as Black people, we're taught to be careful. We're taught that we can't just go anywhere. We're taught to use the buddy system. We have all of these warnings that are given to us as children. And then we know at the same time, we know that our white counterparts do not receive these same warnings. They don't receive that. We are also taught that you have to work twice as hard to be half as good as a white person. And then it just makes you think, well, white people don't receive the same warnings. They don't receive the same information. And what it must be like, to travel through life as a privileged person and to not be othered for your entire life.
I don't even have words. What can I say? Like, I just,
But
sorry.
that's why we do what we do. That's
Yeah.
why we keep working. That's why we fight oppression on a daily basis, and we work with people in community, we work with organizers, and we speak out. We provide therapy for people who are experiencing racial trauma. We provide therapy for people who have experienced incarceration. That's our journey. That's the fight that we're in. But we're also recognizing that there's some people who don't have it. There's some people in our community who don't have it in them to make that fight, to do that fight. So we will fight on their behalf. And that's what we can do. And then for our white counterparts who are in the fight with us, who are our allies, that's very helpful for us. And it's even more helpful when our white counterparts, like you're doing right now, open up spaces for us to speak out. It's also so helpful when we receive funding. That is our getting that funding allows us to reduce the racial trauma that people have received over time. Now, all of that is very helpful.
I think hearing the things you're saying today, it really brings home why it's so important for a person of color, a Black person, to have a therapist who understands and who has lived experience of some of the traumas. Because, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's hard. It's hard for some people to, put aside their own biases or prejudices or just lack of understanding of certain experiences. And as I said, I'm still learning so many things to this day. And I think that it's hard because not everybody is going to tell me, whether in my personal or professional life, about those kinds of traumatic experiences, right? I think it's hard for people to share with a person who's white, this happened to me or that happened to me. I had an experience. I went on vacation with a friend of mine who's a Black person, and we were in the Caribbean, and this guy came along, a local guy came along, and he was hitting on my friend. And she's like, "Please leave me alone." And he goes, "Oh, you don't like Black guys?" And she goes, "What are you talking about? I'm a Black woman." He goes, "No, you're not. You're not Black. You're light. You're light skinned. You're not Black." And then he went away and she looked at me and I was like, I don't even know what to say. Like, I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I'm not going to comment on that because then my head just exploded. Right. And she said, yeah, she said she can't win, like in among white people, she's Black, and among Black people, she's light. And like, she can't win. So I said, yeah, I'm going to keep my mouth shut and not say anything because I don't want to put my foot in it. But like, wow.
So many of us experience internalized racism,
Yeah.
and colorism is one of the impacts of that. And so that's something that I dealt with all my life, but from a different standpoint. As a dark-skinned Black woman, I was called a roach. I was called Blackie my whole life, from childhood into young adulthood. Those were the names that people would call dark-skinned Black people, that we as Black people would call each other because of colorism, because slavery taught us that dark-skinned people are less than, and that lighter-skinned people, or what enslaved people that were in the house and not in the field, were better. And so with that colorism comes this idea and this internalized racism that a light-skinned person thinks they're better than other people. And so it sounds like he was deflecting in that way when he said that to her. I've experienced that as well, and I've had a lot of friends who are either mixed or very light skinned who have had the exact same experience of people assuming that they don't like Black people, that they don't like Black guys, they don't like Black women because they're lighter skinned, which is, in a nutshell, just internalized racism. And that comes directly from colonization, comes directly from the oppressor, comes directly from slavery. But if someone is not faced with that, if someone doesn't fight that battle and go to therapy and really deal with that, then they never see that, and it just continues.
It's like so many things to contend with, right? It's not enough to just be a Black person. You have to be a Black person with a certain shade of skin and a certain type of hair and a certain type of body. And
Yeah.
wow,
There's
like,
so many factors that we're facing on a daily basis. And we're just going to work, like, have a good day, and
how
it's
was your weekend?
yeah. And so about just getting used to it. And it's not something I'm willing to accept.
No, well, like I said, hopefully with, having more platforms, maybe people can be a little bit less oblivious and a little bit more sensitive and a little bit less, over entitled and a little less, willing to appropriate the culture without loving the people, because I think that's ugly, right? Like if you're gonna love a culture, love the people.
Absolutely.
Right? Like if you're gonna, take on things from a culture, if you're gonna wear the clothes and eat the food and dance the dances and sing the songs, like love the people too, because they're the ones who created all that
Yeah.
stuff that you love. So yeah, so hopefully people will be a little bit less oblivious. Now, you need money for this rebuild program, right? You need a fair bit of money. How can people get money to your program if they are so inclined to support you in this incredibly important project?
Rebuild is in need of $300,000 to continue providing free therapy to formerly incarcerated people of color.
That's US dollars.
US dollars. And if you would like to donate, you can donate directly on our website at darknessrisingproject.org. There are donation buttons on all of our social media at Darkness Rising Project. And we have a Mighty Cause page that gives a full story to exactly how Rebuild works, exactly where the funding goes, how much therapy is being funded. And in addition to that, it includes facts like therapy costs between $100 to $270 per session for trauma therapy, and that is the therapy that we're funding.
That's incredible. Yeah. Like I can't even imagine the good that you're doing. It just sounds so phenomenal. Like such incredible things, happening in those sessions because, between being a person of color just in general, a Black person in the United States dealing with systemic racism and, colonialism and all that nonsense, and then being a person who's just been incarcerated and having to come back into life, the trauma upon the trauma upon the trauma, that's complex PTSD. So this work is so incredible. I like the fact that you took the suggestion by this woman, Miriam Kaba, and that you said, yeah, we're going to run with it. And you're doing this incredible work. Like this is a project that absolutely merits funding, and people need to, think seriously about, who they're going to donate money to before the end of the year. Everyone has to do their donations before December 31st. This is an excellent, excellent project to contribute to. I think this is something that really needs to keep going. This is so, so important. So I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention today. It's so meaningful.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving us a platform.
Anytime, Carlita, I'm always here to learn more stuff and to support the cause in any way I can.
Likewise. Thank you.
Well, listen, tell me one thing before we go, okay? I want to have a little call to action for the listener before we end today. What can you suggest to people apropos of our conversation today?
I would love for people to have a conversation with their family members during the holidays about any potential biases that family members may have. If there is a joke, if there's a racist joke that happens at the table, don't laugh at it. Have a conversation, have a real conversation about it, and really encourage your loved ones to talk about their mental health.
Wow, that's a good call to action. That's going to make for some interesting family dinners.
Yes, that's true.
Well, Carlita Victoria Ector, it's been a pleasure again talking with you today, and I wish you all great success with these important endeavors that you're doing these days.
Thank you so much.
This is Dr. Marcia Sirota. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review and your comments wherever you listen to podcasts, and don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter at marciasirotamd.com, where you'll learn about upcoming online events as well. Also, we love getting referrals from our listeners about future podcast guests, so please email us at info@marciasirotamd.com.